Hello and welcome back to Niche Tea, where we talk about drama happening in communities you may not be a part of. Last time we talked about the still ongoing situation in the K-pop community that is happening in the administration of HYBE labels, which is the label that owns BTS, specifically between Min Heejin, who is the CEO of Adore, which is one of the sub-labels under HYBE, and who is the creative director and manager of New Jeans, and the people who are in charge of HYBE at like a corporate level. Latest being that now it's apparently coming out that the HYBE executives have been involved with a cult. Sure, why not? Today we're moving on to what I'm going to call the foodie community because it involves two very primary sub-communities within that, specifically the vegan community and the dairy community. Is there a cheese community? There's gotta be a cheese community. Anyway, we're talking about the Good Food Awards. What are the Good Food Awards? The Good Food Awards is an annual food competition for companies who are based in the US to enter their specific food items into. The competition has been going since 2011 and it is put on by the Good Foods Foundation. The foundation pretty much says the goal of the competition, along with a few other things that they put on, is to platform and highlight very quality foods that follow a very strict set of guidelines that they have laid out. There's a whole list of rules, but basically it needs to be made in America, it needs to be ethically sourced, everything needs to be very high quality, it has to taste good, and it has to be sustainably manufactured. And from what I can see, the award is fairly prestigious. It is something that, for example, a small business would very much want to win to be able to show off that they have a very quality product, which could be monumental depending on the size of the business for securing retail deals. One last thing is that the categories within the competition are for what I would call like base grocery food. So beer, cider, coffee, preserves, cheese, honey, not full completed meals. So what happened? The way the competition is done is a series of judges are selected for each category based on their expertise levels for that particular type of food. Then each of the entrants is blinded, so none of the judges know exactly who's whatever they're eating or trying at that particular point. Those judges then select a list of finalists, and I believe a winner at the same time. The finalists are released as like an announcement in January, but I don't believe there is a second round of judging after the fact. But even being a finalist is fantastic. Again, the purpose of this is to highlight quality food products. So even if you are not a winner, but are a finalist in a particular category, that can be very valuable for you as a brand. It seems then that the winners are sent a separate notification after the finalists are announced to say, hey, you won, so that they can then schedule time to come out and go to an official ceremony and receive an award and do the whole thing. Well, something happened this year that it seems has never happened before, and that was specifically within the cheese category. A cheese made it onto the finalist list, which was vegan. And turns out they won. The very aggressively named Climax Foods came in first with their blue cheese, which I've actually been able to find a good amount of press surrounding both Climax Foods and this particular cheese going back through 2023. Now, I haven't tried it, as I don't like blue cheese, but from what I can see, it is apparently very good and very, very similar to dairy cheese. It seems like the general goal that Climax Foods as a brand has is to utilize data and science to the best of their ability to make plant-based foods, which is as indistinguishable as possible from non-plant-based. And apparently they've done a very good job. Now, this cheese showing up in the finalist list in January already sparked a huge buzz. Even not knowing that they had won, vegan cheese has never made it into the finalists for this competition, ever. And I don't think that's too surprising. Vegan cheese has always been kind of a hard thing to get. Like, I know vegans who just straight up just say don't do cheese because vegan cheese is just not it. So even this alone was like, holy shit. And traditional cheesemakers were all over this. Pretty much everyone that I can find was saying that it's not really cheese and it needs to be in its own category. Even people who are trying to, it seems, come off as nice were still saying it needs to be in its own category, which, I mean, I haven't been tracking this for a long time, but did anyone care until it got good enough to compete with traditional cheese? Maybe they did, I'm just saying. Eventually it seemed to die down because, again, only Climax Foods knew that they had won. I'm sure they were expecting probably another round of grief after they accepted their awards at the award show, which is tonight, the 29th. However, the founder and CEO of Climax Foods is a man named Oliver Zahn, and he and his team were planning on going to Portland, Oregon tonight for the finalist ceremony because, again, they were notified in January that they had won. Until what had to have been at most 1 week ago from today, the actual award ceremony, he found out from a reporter that his cheese was no longer listed on the finalist list on the website. And then by following up, he found out that they had been disqualified. You don't say. People then asked the director, Sarah Weiner, of the Good Foods Foundation why Climax was disqualified, and she initially didn't want to say. But she then admitted that someone who shall remain anonymous, it could have been another contestant, it could have been literally anybody, brought forth a specific complaint about Climax's cheese, claiming that it didn't meet the requirements for entry. She claims this has nothing to do with like Big Dairy coming for the vegan cheese that's doing well finally, and rather it has to do with the fact that simply more people were aware of this particular vegan cheese being on the finalist list because that hasn't happened before. And so because of that, there was a higher likelihood that someone would be intimately familiar with the process and be able to flag if something was wrong. While sloppy, because in my opinion, any of this should have been reviewed at the time of entry, not after you announce the finalists, I could maybe get behind that, except the reason that she gives for why the cheese was ultimately disqualified is related to a specific ingredient it had, namely kokum butter. The reason there's an issue with the kokum butter is because this is not classified as what's called GRAS, generally regarded as safe by the FDA. And if you look at the contest rules on their website, you can see under Rule 6 that it does say that if there are any uncommon ingredients that are included in your recipe, they do need to have that GRAS qualification from the FDA. Common ingredients don't, because there are some very common ingredients which don't have it for some reason. Funny thing about that though, if you go to the Wayback Machine and look at that exact same page in January, when the finalists were announced, that clause isn't there. Weird. Weiner admits that that wasn't there, but says that it has always been a rule and that they were just solidifying it. Which, cool, do it next year. Weiner also says that the Climax cheese violates the rule that any cheese entered must be ready for retail. I don't know exactly what the specifics of what that means are, and I would hope that that's outlined somewhere, but the CEO of Climax Foods claims that it is retail ready. On top of that, he says that even if the generally regarded as safe parameter is an official rule now, his cheese still shouldn't be excluded because it doesn't actually use kokum butter anymore, and it hasn't. It uses cocoa butter, which is generally regarded as safe. And he does specifically say that the new recipe was the one that was entered into the competition. Weiner claims that their ingredients list still includes kokum butter, but I haven't seen anybody this is what we sent. Here's the email and here's the list. And on top of all of this, Zahn, the Climax Foods CEO, claims that no one reached out to him about any of these issues. He would have been happy to clear them up. Weiner claims that they did reach out and that the Climax team had a specific set of time to respond, and they didn't meet that deadline or respond at all, probably because it sounds like they never got it. Weiner claims that her team reached out to the person on the Climax Foods team who entered the brie into the competition in the first place. But since it had been 6 months, apparently that person no longer worked at Climax Foods, which apparently Weiner claims her team didn't realize. I feel like you would have gotten an undeliverable notification for their email, but okay. Weiner then claims they emailed another employee and got no response. I understand that people are busy. I understand that everyone has tons of shit going on, that they're all juggling both at work and at home and all this stuff. I also get that if you enter into a contest, you should be paying as much attention as possible to potential communications from the organizers of that contest. However, there's no way there wasn't a list of company representatives, including the CEO himself, on the application for this contest. And simply given the special circumstances surrounding this, you have someone you have already notified that they've won. They are a first of their kind winner in this type of category. This is a big deal. You can go out of your way to make sure you get in contact with them for this type of thing. Because to me, this is very reminiscent of the Hugo Awards. Obviously, I don't work in this industry. I don't do anything food related. My opinion means fuck all. But from a completely outsider perspective, this hurts the brand of the Good Food Foundation a lot. I have no idea if this is going to be a big piece of news that gets around or if it's literally just going to disappear. But I come out of this thinking way less of them as an organization. And I'm not at all convinced by their response that this decision was not the result of them caving to outside pressures that didn't want a vegan cheese to win this award, which is truly insane to say, but there's money associated with it. And that's why I believe it. I absolutely agree with Zahn that this is incredibly embarrassing for the organization and for Weiner herself. I guess we'll see tonight who wins.